Hey, you guys. Welcome. How do I want to make sure I'm adding in. I want to go ahead and invite this month's author with us. Hey, Angela. Let me see. Oh my gosh. How do I do this again? Okay. Setting. How are you? Guess. Oh, right. That's what I wanted. So I am just, once I see Casey on here, I'm going to go ahead and invite her. Oh, here we go. Let me invite. There she is. Yes. I am so excited for this.
Hola. Hi. Ay, no, qué...
Oh, this is not Casey. Hold on. Sorry. Wrong button here.
Okay.
There we go. My bad. Awkward. Love to see it. Okay, let's try this again. There we go.
Okay, can you hear me?
Hey, Casey. Yes.
Okay. I've never done this before, so hopefully this is...
There.
It's working.
Yes. I'm so excited. Oh,
How are you?
I am doing great. I loved your book. Okay.
Oh, good.
I have heard so many people telling me too that they loved it. So first, I want to welcome everyone on here to our Under the Umbrella Book Club for February. I have here with me Casey Brooks, who is the author of this month's pick, Morbid Anniversaries. And I just like to start this off, if you don't mind just introducing yourself and telling us about your writing journey.
Oh, gosh. Hi, I'm Casey Brooks. I'm the author of this book, as she showed you. And I don't really know how to describe my writing journey. Everybody's got these like nice long-winded, wonderful stories about how they always wanted to be a writer, and I just kind of started writing a couple of years ago as an outlet for my anxiety, and kind of instead of process or keeping everything in here, I was just kind of making up stories and processing it on a sheet of paper, and it turned into this. So.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
That's
So it's been a lot of fun, kind of working through all of that and using my creativity in a very different way. I've been a photographer for a long time, so I do a lot of that. None in the background of my of my apartment right now, but I have all kinds of pictures up and stuff of my work. But yeah, now I'm kind of channeling it elsewhere, which has been a good one.
How did you get in? I feel like fantasy would not be like most writers' first go to. How did you choose this in particular?
Because I needed it to not be real life.
That makes sense.
I really needed it to, because a lot of like my own personal struggles with, obviously the book, if anybody on here has read it, is centers a lot about grief. So I kind of put a lot of that into the female main character, Nora, and I needed her to be able to explore that in different ways other than how I was already handling it. So yeah, hence a somewhat fantasy world and turned into an urban fantasy.
You said that Nora kind of resembled that's Bethany said weirdly, you are exactly how I pictured Nora to look. Honestly,
Oh, really?
that's hysterical.
Yeah.
But you said that you wanted that Nora was handling it differently than you in terms of grief?
I kind of needed her to do it in a different way, to find a solution to it all. So putting her in more of a fantastical setting of, yes, it's loosely based off of, a real world and a real life. She still harbors a lot of anger, and she had to deal with that in whichever way she needed to, and obviously she came to a solution to that at the end. But yeah, I just needed a little bit of a broader world to deal with that, and so I created a little bit of it.
A lot of it. I loved it. The one thing I also really liked was that the which one do I want to start with? There was so much that I liked, but I guess starting off with like there were so many different themes. Like I know the main theme was grief and loss, but there was a lot of depth to it in a way that's usually hard to capture, I find. And I think that was super impressive and something to really be proud of that there was a lot of juxtapositions too between Charles, between Nora, and then you also throw in death into the mix. And so I guess I'm curious as to how you came up with all these characters.
Um, Nora is kind of my anger outlet, and Charles is the bright, sunshiny person that I would really love to be.
Yes. Oh my
And
gosh.
Death is very much a cynical middle third party. So it was but like I've been saying, it was interesting to explore my anger with grief through Nora, but then to know that there's also this other side, right? So when you kind of get through the five stages and the acceptance of it all, and other people deal with, they kind of try to skip anger in a way Charles did, and he tried to solely be happy and only focus on the good. So you've got two sides to that, and they were polar opposites of each other. And I created Death as kind of a middle point to that, who didn't really care one way or another. He was just there to exist. Um,
But he did care a little bit.
yeah.
I don't, would there even be a, like, because that was the funny part. I had written on like one of my pink tabs, I was like, why do I feel sad for death right now? But like, because and it was only on like a third of the way in. I'm like, why am I like sad for death? And so it's funny to hear you say that he was kind of the middleman because he was, and yet he had so much emotion
Yeah.
that that in itself was a whole other tricky part to navigate.
Yeah, he was kind of fun to write though, because he cared, but he didn't, and he didn't want people to think that he cared, and then he just wanted to do his job and live a very simple, quiet life, and that quiet life never really found him, right?
Yeah.
So um, you get into that weird middle ground of, you can also be that way, but you're gonna find things that you do care about and that you want to protect as well. So
That's a good, that makes a lot of sense. That was, I kind of like, I had a love-hate relationship with him throughout it all. I feel like that was the purpose of it. And like,
uh-huh.
but then it was funny because every time Lucifer came up, I kept picturing like Lucifer from the TV show. Did you watch that?
I've never seen the TV show, and I've had multiple people be like, "Oh yeah, this reminded me of the show," and I was like, "Okay,
I
cool."
loved it. One thing that was also really cool was because every time like you see fantasy, like you think of like the typical Fourth Wing, you think of Lord of the Rings. Like I feel like there's kind of the two spectrums, and I really liked that this was that urban fantasy with the supernatural elements because that was an
Yeah.
unfamiliar round for me. And so I'm
Yeah.
curious as to what sparked that too.
Um, I think it was mostly because I read a lot of Olive E. Blake.
Okay.
Um, just big fan of her work. I'm just gonna blanket statement that. And she writes mostly urban fantasy. And as I was thinking about this story, I was like, this would be interesting, I think, in a real life setting, because if you're in a true fantasy setting, you've got wars and all kinds of people that, oh, sorry, my computer's trying to turn off on me. You've got wars and all this other stuff that you're contending with, and because for the purpose of the book, the main focus was her grief and everybody's grief, and then moving past that in kind of a fantastical way. I didn't really want to put them in such a heavy setting, because then you'd have to contend with kings and all these other random people who really didn't pertain to the story. So yeah,
That makes a lot of sense. That's really interesting.
mm-hmm.
Because it was really good character development rather than having to like deal with all the world building aspect.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought
Yeah,
that was such a strong part.
Like a sleepy, like coastal English town or something, and there wasn't really a need for huge setting, because it was going to be character driven anyway. So yeah, you've got this town that they're in, and it's quiet and it's old, and people have been there for a really long time, and death hasn't left in however long, and he's just kind of been around, and it's just there. But you've got the people that kind of make the town what it is, which are more important than the actual setting, I guess.
It's like kind of how you connected the idea of like the Kramer house was a house, but it's once she found her people, it became the home.
Yeah.
And I also have to say, I found your Spotify playlist for this, and it was so perfect. I loved it.
Really?
Yes.
Good, I'm glad.
Did it help inspire you too? Like, was it made before?
Yeah, so I kind of fleshed out the idea a little bit, and then as I was writing, I was listening to music that I thought was kind of in the mood. I was like, you know what, this would actually be perfect if I just kept listening to this one singular song, and then the playlist kind of stemmed from there. So.
It was spectacular. I have to share it with everyone after, because like I love it.
Yeah,
It was
it's linked on my website too. I don't know if anybody has that. It's just Casey Brooks writing. If anybody is in the chat is wanting that.
Oh yeah, so. Share it. You do you.
Oh, and I don't know how to work this thing, and if I mess something up, I'll probably be gone. So
totally fair. It's confusing. I also wanted to say that Belle also did like that the setting wasn't too large and overwhelming. So I would agree with that statement, and it's interesting to see I guess the character development to me was huge in this book, because I feel like I've been reading a lot of like world building books, and it was really nice to have like the heart.
Mm-hmm.
So I would just like, that was amazing. But I also have to know, like, what was your favorite part of writing this book? Was it tricky? Is navigating a difficult emotion? And
I think my favorite part was probably forcing my two main characters to move through their own crap, because I kind of pushed them a little bit in obviously different directions, because they started out on opposite ends, right? So they kind of had to meet in the middle a little bit and understand one another. And I think that was a lot of fun to play with, because you never really think about a sunshiny character being forced to be a little cynical, right? You always think about like the super funny characters forcing everybody else into their sunshiny, happy-go-lucky mood all the time. But you never think about going the opposite direction. And I think for that reason, I probably had a little bit more fun writing Charles, because I had to contend with how happy he was and how content he was, but also why that's not always the best solution, right? So not everything is going to be perfect all the time, and you can't just pretend that it is because it's exhausting also, and your other emotions are important too. So
Huh.
yeah.
That's really interesting. I was trying to think because there was at the end, when you were talking, it reminded me of the end of the situation of the book when Death was talking about how, I can't remember the exact quote, but he was talking about how those two had found each other because Nora had brought in almost like the pain out of him or the joy out of the pain out of him and the joy out of her.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that that was a really cool concept because just like you said, it's always the sunshiny and rainbows can't like be brought down, but no, you got to have that anger in there too. So I really appreciated that. And you said too that, okay, this is a random question, but have you ever written poetry? Because when I was reading this, I felt some like poetic aspects, like the fact that like death is a coward was a repeating line. There was like another line and it had that aspect to it.
Um, no, I've
Okay.
never written poetry. I've been forced to write poetry for some English classes, but no, never
Okay.
just for fun. Yeah.
Because it had that really, I don't know, the book overall had a really cool vibe like that I thought was, could have had some,
Yeah. I kind of like the the poetic feel to that of repeating things and you know saying things in threes and really kind of forcing a a narrative home a little bit.
yes.
But it's fun to play with in the lines of writing of trying to add that little bit of poeticness to the words, but not being so completely outright with it. So
Yeah, because it was done really well. It was done with a few things. I was trying to look back for it right before we got on because I was like, there was one other thing, but it had to do with the way Charles felt about her.
mm-hmm.
And it's like almost you did it so it was like one, two, and then the third would be like, boom, like this is it. Death
Mm-hmm.
was a coward. Death was a coward. Okay, Death does not want to be a coward anymore. And it was
Yeah.
so nicely done. Like I loved it. And I can only imagine that like because there was so much art involved in the book that you must have and like you're a photographer, like do these art pieces like mean something to you?
Yeah, they come from my favorite period of art history. The Northern Renaissance art history period is one of my, in all of my art classes that I've taken, all my art history classes, that was always my favorite area to focus on. So yeah, some of my favorite artists come from that time, and the one that I kind of talk about a little bit more in depth is one of my favorites too. So
The astronomer one or
mm-hmm.
okay.
Yeah, Vermeer
I looked
and
that one
Titian
up.
as well, and yeah, I love all of that a lot. And if I always say that if I went back to school and could redo college all over again, I would just do art history and call it a day.
Really?
Yeah.
Because of the love of just like the paintings or what is that?
Um, I just I think really history in general, but I have such a love for art and painting and creating that it kind of falls into the art history realm the most. But just people's like artists in that time, their attention to everything, and that is the one thing that they did, and they studied it, and they apprenticeshiped with people and with experts, and I just think that was really cool, and it's really interesting to see too how painting and sculpture and all of that really evolves throughout time, but it also the themes also kind of stay the same too.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
That last point, yeah, they evolve, but the themes are always the same.
Yeah.
Huh. That's really cool. That makes a lot of sense. Because this book kind of felt like, obviously it's a book, but like it had like an art tone to it that again, that poetry connection, like it was written so well and a little different than some of the other books we've read previously that I loved that contrast. Now, how did you go? I guess when it comes to like, oh, hold on, wait. You said that you liked the thing of threes, like in poetry and stuff. Is that why there were three POVs? Or is that
That
just
I think is just a coincidence. But when I write, I love a triple explanation or descriptor or really anything. Yeah.
was Nora, I can't remember, was Nora your favorite character you think in this book? Or
I go back and forth. I think in parts of the book, I really liked her. In other parts of the book, I really like Charles and his constant need to like be in her space, even though he knows for sure that she hates that. And I also really like Death in a lot of chapters too, because he's just kind of this sassy old man who can't die, and he's just there at the whims of the people around him who don't understand the world, right? So, yeah.
I also thought it was cool how like you had it so it didn't have to be this crazy idea that like because I was thinking, oh, how would Charles explain death to Dylan and Andrew? But they already knew.
Yeah. So, like, with him, he's open and he talks about things and he has friends, and so the people around him know what's going on. With Nora, she doesn't tell anybody because she doesn't like to talk about things and she doesn't want to open up to people. And Charlotte's there, but Charlotte is the one person that she tells the most things to, and she still doesn't tell her everything, right? So that was fun to play with too. Is you get to the end of the book and you meet Charles's friends for the first time, and you're like, oh, look at him having friends, good for him. And then they know everything, and they just are like they're in constant contact, and you know, you don't realize that throughout the book because he can. I kind of go into this a little bit, but he can be a little single-minded and focus on one thing, but he definitely leans on the people that he has around him.
That was so funny. Yes. That was so funny that I love that their friends didn't think they were crazy. Same. I loved how he expressed his love for Nora and how it grew throughout the chapters. Yes. I also, before we dive into like their love and stuff, the fact that Nora said, "Oh, your friends aren't imaginary." Like I didn't even think of the fact that Charles might have friends.
Uh-huh.
Like it's like when you're watching a TV show and you kind of forget that, oh, none of these kids have parents. Like,
yeah, where'd they go? Right?
where did they go? So that was so. Oh, sorry, excuse me. That was so funny.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and because she kind of teases him throughout the book, she's like, "Are you sure? Like, are you positive that they exist?" Yeah.
Are you just a crazy person?
Yeah, have you just made all these people up? Like, yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And then is The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, is that something from your, like, do you love that book?
Yeah, I really liked that story too, and the whole like them going up to heaven and then going down to hell and having these conversations. You know, the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Aslan is supposed to be God, right? So it kind of tied into that too. Of like, I grew up Catholic. I personally am not religious anymore, but it was kind of another way to explore that as well, of what I grew up in, knowing what I knew from all of that and using that to kind of mess with them a little bit in their own world. So yeah, it was really kind of that tie.
Oh, that's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Wait, what do you mean mess with them?
Like, you know, they don't really have set religion, but they have this idea of souls go to heaven or souls go to hell, and you know, does that exist or does it not? And then you find out that they do, and another fun thing was making Charles. You have you only visit hell in Charles's POV, and you only visit heaven in Nora's POV, and it's kind of swapped that way. So you're like, oh, well, you would think that she would relate a little better, but no, I forced it in his POV so that he would have to kind of contend with those weird, terrible feelings, and then she would have to contend with the opposite of that.
Oh my gosh, I didn't even realize that.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Like it just like because I understood the reasoning. I was like, oh, she's like a little afraid. Oh my gosh, that makes so much more sense.
Mm-hmm.
I love that little detail.
Yeah.
That's I love that. Oh, that's everything. I also thought it was a really cool way when even though Nora was so mad at death that she still stepped in and was like, I gotta take care of these souls. And then Sam, ugh, to Sam. That's like all I can say.
I know.
What I guess that dynamic was really interesting to me is like the Sam connection of it all.
Mm-hmm.
Because then at the end, he's like, oh, well, love is like, he has this one line of like, it's worth the wait. And I'm still like, I don't know if I like him. I don't think I like him. I don't think I like Sam, but I'm like,
yeah, you kind of like have to hate him, right? Because out of principle for support of Charles, right? But at the same time, he is in a similar position as Death, and he's going to live for as long as essentially he wants to until he's just like, yeah, I've had enough, which is likely going to be forever. And then so he's seen a lot of things, and in also a slight contrast to Death is he's just here having a good time and enjoying everything and doesn't really care what he says to anybody. It's all very superficial, whereas Death's immortality has made him a little deeper.
oh,
Mm-hmm. And so you hate Sam, but at the same time, he does have a somewhat decent perspective too. So
yeah. And it's like strange because you wouldn't expect it. Like when he helped Nora's headaches, you're like, what are you doing? Do you like, where do you stand?
mm-hmm.
And then it was so sweet because I guess one of my questions too for you was leaning into Kat's too was how she said that she loved his love for Nora and how it grew throughout the chapters. So when you went into writing this,
Mm-hmm.
did you know how like I guess when it comes to like fantasy writing in this case, how did you like go about their love story? Like
Um, I knew I wanted them to end up together, but I also knew that I rather wanted them to have sweeter, quieter moments than this like giant in your face, like fated mates kind of thing love story, because they were both working on so much internally that in order, you can't necessarily in life have another person who's going to solve all your problems, but you can at least work through it and find another person to kind of ground you a little bit too. So that was the main purpose. Where there is an attraction, obviously, but at the same time, she is certain she's gonna die in a year, and he's like, yeah, she's gone. So we'll see. But yeah, it was very interesting.
but there is no way that he could not fall for her in this case. Oh, sorry.
Yeah. No.
Oh, so sorry.
Oh, that's okay. I'm getting over being sick, so I don't sound super good either.
We're thriving. We are thriving.
Truly.
Um, did you have any favorite quotes or moments in this book then?
Um, Weirdly enough, I think one of my favorite scenes is in chapter 2 when Death takes her to work with him,
Yes.
and they go up into the house, and nobody's talking, and it's really quiet, and she's very much internalizing all of this stuff that she's dealt with throughout the years, but she's never actually seen other people deal with as well. Like, she says, I'm very aware that other people deal with this too, but she's aware, but she doesn't really see it. And so seeing it from another person's perspective really forces her into feeling, because she's gotten so far away from that. And I think that's probably one of my favorite scenes, because it's very introspective for her.
Huh. Yeah. That's really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I was trying to then think like, because in that it's like she's aware of what's going on. Like even throughout the entire story, she's always aware of what she's doing. And
Mm-hmm.
then eventually she just kind of has to like lean in a little bit. So, do you think that was there a moment, like one moment when it was like, okay, we're leaning in? I was trying to go back and think.
Um, she kind of just has to decide that it's okay to want things, and it's okay to want to be around other people and experience that joy. And when she's forced into it enough, she realizes that it really is okay. Um, and so at that point she kind of leans into it, and that's when you kind of see her hope growing a little. Um, and that's also slightly when Charles is becoming more and more realistic a little too.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
It was so gradual though with Charles that like I actually like I didn't really notice it until I was going back and like looking at the little differences. And
Mm-hmm.
like they both had such amazing like gradual growth in such a way that without changing their entire personality, they just like added from each other.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved the part when Sam was like, or Charles was like to Sam, why do you call her Sunshine? And he was like, or because she's the whole sun. And he's like, no, she's not. Like,
Yeah. Like, what are you talking about?
I loved that.
Yeah.
I I loved it.
He's like, do you not see her poor attitude? What is this?
Do you not see that cloud hanging around her head? Like, she might be
Like,
the moon. I don't know.
yeah. I mean, nothing other than the sun, though.
No, that was so
Yeah.
funny.
Mm-hmm.
And then the scene that got me, I was like, there was two parts of this. Was like when it was the flashback to her having to see the parents because that was
Mm-hmm.
so unexpected. What made you want to include like that part of her story, I guess, too?
I think to for that specific flashback really is just she a lot of her deal in general, right, is her family wasn't really centered around love and happiness, and so she kind of fell into her own way of that cynicism that they all brought together. And so making her reflect on all of that forces her to realize that, that's the way that they were, and there also were good times too, because you think about it goes from the scene where she sees her parents into the scene with her grandfather, and she has this nice sweet moment that, yeah, there aren't great people around, but the people who do love you a lot. And so she kind of had to remind herself that there were people who cared about her too.
That makes a lot of sense. I loved that scene. And not the first part, but like the part with the grandpa.
The part where she goes and sits with her grandpa. Yeah.
Like have to paint and the orange paint on the noses. I was like, and then it also comes back to that idea of like that whole. I think I wrote it down because I liked that quote. It was like, joy and pain she realized could exist in tandem, that the presence of one made the other sweeter, because it's almost like when she's thinking about her grandpa now, she has this joy and she has this love, but there's also such anger and resentment towards that. And that theme connected so much too throughout that it was like that I don't know, it's just really interesting to me because that's something that I feel like I haven't read a lot about, is this feeling two emotions, and it's okay to feel both of these things because it means that you loved them.
Yeah, and you also kind of get wrapped up in one or the other sometimes, right? Like you think that, oh, this person is infallible and they can do no wrong and they're larger than life, and then you learn their secrets and you're like, oh. And you have to learn how to grapple with that a little bit. And I think we all have those two sides to us where, you know, people like some things, but they don't like everything, and they might not agree with everything, but they like these other parts too. So that was something that I really wanted her to have to deal with. Was, you know, not everybody's perfect, clearly, and how could she deal with such anger, but also towards this person that she thought was like her entire world.
Yeah. Because it's something that like I feel like a lot of us too deal with on like, it's like, oh, you find out like, oh, someone is, they have this part, you're like, don't love that you have that part of you, but like I like you. So it's like being able to separate that, and like, of course, not most of the time they're not as extreme as this case. I hope, but that's a really interesting part of this too. And I almost was a little shocked that Nora could just kind of forgive him, because I don't know if I could.
Yeah, because at the end, she kind of comes to this realization of if she doesn't forgive him, she's just angry all the time.
Yeah.
And in order to not be angry and to move on a little bit, she has to forgive him, and that's more doing that for herself rather than for him. And then she kind of turns the rest of it around and uses it to create different programs at the museum and use what he left her basically to try and make it right.
Yeah. Can we also dive into a little bit of the magic of the home?
Yeah.
Because I loved that part. It was almost like a little bit of Beauty and the Beast-esque, but like so much better, because like who wouldn't want the fireplace to automatically go and the lights to sync when someone needs help? Like, what was your thought process around that?
I really, when I was writing, I really loved in Divine Rivals where they had the magic like closets, right?
Yes.
So I loved that, and I thought, how fun would it be if a house just had a couple little quirks and it looked after its residents, and how would that work and how would that play out? And so it kind of takes care of Nora, and one of my favorite parts about the house is like when she runs into the room and she's angry and she's yelling and all this stuff, and it doesn't turn the lights on, and it's like, oh, I don't know, we're just gonna like, so that you can see, we're gonna put a lamp on in the corner, but you gotta chill out first. So yeah,
Charles, I like, the room's hot enough, like, no, back off.
They were like, okay, you don't need a fire right now. We'll calm down and then we'll figure this out.
That's so funny. And like the fact that, because the first thing I thought too when Charles walked into Carter's room, I was like, wouldn't it be dusty? Like, of course, that's my first thought. Like,
Yeah, I'm like, it hasn't been used in a while. And so that was another way to mitigate all of that too, because you're in this giant home and that she has no staff other than people who occasionally cook her food because she has to eat, right? So, and then you've got Vincent who's around and he kind of is there really just to watch her and make sure she's okay. And then the house is like, I'll just clean myself. It's fine.
that would be so nice.
It would be really nice. Yeah.
Yes. I like this house. Like,
Yeah.
even just like a room sounds great. It
Clean
reminds
something.
Yes, like
Yeah.
take something off the plate.
Mm-hmm.
It reminded me a little bit now that you mentioned it. It reminded the house itself is giving a. Did you read the Inheritance Games?
Yes. Yeah, I did.
It's kind of like that a little bit.
Yeah, like all the little hidden secrets that the house has, but
Yeah.
it's more magical than built in. Yeah.
Oh no, this house sounds way better to be honest because it cleans itself. Like that's right up my alley. But that's so interesting. And then I loved Vincent, even though he was such like a little character. Like I could picture him.
Such a sweet old man.
Such a sweet old man. Like I could picture him wearing like cute like sweaters, even though I know he was wearing a gray suit
all the time. Yeah.
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 Did did your characters get into like how did you come up with all of these characters and their backgrounds? In terms of like Vincent and oh my gosh, Charlotte.
Yeah, I liked her. Her and my sister have very similar personalities. So
Okay.
yeah, that was kind of easy to write her a little bit because I had a person in mind.
Yep.
And
She's a riot.
but the rest of them, she what?
She's a riot.
No, yeah, she's a good time.
Yeah.
And the rest of them, like Nora, like I said, I put a lot of myself into, and Charles, I needed an opposite. Death. When I think about Death, I kind of think about Tommy Shelby in a less murderous way. A little mysterious, just likes to walk through the town and scowl at people and tell people what to do. And then, Nora needed friends and Charles needed friends, and you have all these people that should exist, and how would they exist? So how would they exist and complement their personalities as well? Or how would they exist and shape their personalities and not be in the story? Like Charles's mom was super positive and had all of this positive energy all the time and forced that upon him, which in turn made him think he needed to be that way too. Whereas Nora and all of her people who weren't around in the story, they weren't very kind. And Nora, while she tried to be kind and good and all of those things, she still was kind of negative.
And yet she was the best of them all.
Yeah.
Also, Belle, I completely agree with you. You said Vincent reminds you of Alfred from Batman. Yes.
Yeah, a little. Now that I think about it, yeah.
I love that.
Uh-huh.
And did you have any favorite like specific quotes from this all too? I love a good quote.
Let's see. I don't know. I was looking through earlier to see if I don't really know. I mean, there's some that I have highlighted, and I'm like, oh, that's not too bad that I wrote that.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, no, so many. I have a list.
Like when they go into hell for the first time, and Charles says only the dead knew where they are now, and they wouldn't tell a soul. I was like, yeah, that's gonna be my favorite one.
That's a great one. That scene was, whew, because in the moment you're like, oh wow, this is a lot, but it got even more intense when you connect the Noah of it all,
Mm-hmm.
which I did not see coming actually.
Oh, really? Good.
Yes, no, yeah, like I just assumed he was down there. Like, why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
But then I did tear up at the end. I'm not gonna lie. When he had to go back in, I was like, this is hard. Like, it made sense at the same time, but that was a crazy plot twist. How was it in that moment? Like, what was going through your mind with this note with the Noah character?
Um, he's her older brother. I'm an older sibling, and you try to do your best to be positive for your younger siblings, even if you really don't feel that all the time. And so with him, it was about understanding where she was coming from because they came from the same place, right? But also trying to nudge her in a direction of choosing a different path because he didn't want her, he wanted the best for her, right? And he didn't want her to live so negatively like their parents did. And he didn't want her to fall into this acceptance that everything was just going to be the way that it was, and maybe fighting for it was worth it. And I think that was important for him to come back around and just remind her of all of that.
Yeah, that makes
Mm-hmm.
that is exactly what he did.
Mm-hmm.
Huh. It was interesting to me though because one question I had. So the order of their passings, was that not by age? Because Izzy,
No.
okay, because Izzy passed when they were 11, right?
Yeah, and Carter, the other one that she kind of talks about the most, is he passed right before them, and he was a similar age too. So it really just kind of took them all at random.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. That's terrifying. That makes it so much worse.
Yeah, it kind of does.
Yeah, like
Mhm.
that part, I was like, what? Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And one other thing I loved too was the aspect of the museum part was when they walked into the room and it was a bright orange. And I just liked how each room really represented each person.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that that was an interesting addition to the art theme and everything as well. So I love that.
Mm-hmm. Because they all kind of have a very specific aura, right? And I needed, in order to break up the museum a little bit and show the different rooms, that was fun to play around with too. Of what would her being look like displayed out on a wall, and what would Noah's look like, and what would her grandfather's look like.
And her room looked, I like pictured it all with like the sky, like the stars and everything. And it was that perfect connection to the nickname of the little star. And like, I guess, what was it? Where did that nickname come from?
I kind of I don't know. It was more like I wasn't gonna call her sunshine, and I wasn't gonna call her anything like super overly bright and shiny, and I needed something to where someone saw a little bit of light in her, but it wasn't like in your face. Yeah, it's kind of where that came from.
Oh,
Yes.
that makes sense. The little
Yeah.
light in the star. Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so cute. And I liked how in the piano scene, like that's really like I think the first spot where we see like the grandpa calling it. Like I think like the first page might have, but I really like that little connection too. Oh, it was so cute.
Yeah.
I loved
Yeah.
it.
I like that too because her brother, you know, was this bright, sunshiny being and was always considered the sun. And it was nice. It was fun to mirror that with the two of them too, where she thought that she wasn't as bright as her brother, but other people found that a little bit um, to kind of balance them out a tad bit.
Just a little bit.
Well,
And then Charles comes in and continues to balance her out. Like it's
Mhm.
literally so cute. And then Charlotte meets, well, potentially Andrew. It was
Yeah.
so cute.
Yeah. Charlotte's just like, I think you're cute. We could hang out.
Come here
Maybe.
often.
If I have time. Yeah.
She's too busy planning everything.
Uh-huh.
I loved it. Oh,
Yeah.
I also like to leave a little time at the end just for any questions people may have too. Um, I know so many of you guys like loved reading this book. Just as I did, like it was so like I honestly like especially like finding out that it was your debut novel. Like obviously I knew that, but like I wasn't expecting. It was such an amazing read. Like I can't say that enough.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you guys doing this. This was a lot of fun. And yeah, I mean, my debut novel, but at the same time, my goal was to get out what I needed to get out, and it turned into a book. And if it sold some copies, it sold some copies, and I would be happy with that. And yeah.
Bethany
So.
wants to know when the next book is.
I'm working on two different stories right now. One is a political fantasy, and then the other is more of a gothic fantasy, like witch versus witch hunter kind of thing. Very much One Dark Window vibes.
Wait, stop.
Yeah. And so the political fantasy is in the editing stages. But there's this whole world to that one. So that's not going to come out this year, but the gothic fantasy that I'm working on, oh, there it goes again, is likely, the goal is to have it out in September.
Okay.
For like spooky season and all of that fun stuff.
Wait, that's so exciting.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun because it's the characters in what I'm working on now. I'm calling it my secret project.
Yeah.
For now, because I don't want to reveal the title just yet, but the characters are a lot more fierce, and it's very much a fantasy setting. And you have a little bit of a dynamic of, you have this witch and this witch hunter, and the witch hunter is the captain of the King's Guard, and they're being forced to work together to save their kingdom by the king. So the king needs a witch, and she is the witch that he wants. And yeah, now they have to go on this journey, and we'll see where that takes them. So
that's so exciting. Like that sounds so good already. I love that.
It's so much fun because they just kind of yell at each other most of the time because they don't like each other, obviously, and they're struggling to get along. The easiest way to communicate is just to be sassy with one another, and that's been fun to write. Yeah,
that's amazing. That is so cool. I am so excited to read those. Like, I love this book so much. I can't say it enough. 5 stars.
Thank you.
I loved it. And I'm so grateful for you joining us tonight. This was such a great time.
Yeah, well, I'm, again, like I said, I'm very grateful that you guys picked my book, and it really enjoyed it as well, and this was a lot of fun, so I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight, and everyone too for tuning in. So many amazing comments too, questions. Love to see it. So thank you guys so much. Thank you, Casey, and I am so excited for your next books.
Yeah, I will keep you guys updated.
Please do. I can't wait.
Yeah.
Pre-ordering.
Yeah, well, I am gonna. The title reveal is at the end of the month.
That's
so
soon.
That at least, and then yeah, we'll get some more information in March and April.
I love this. I will stay tuned.
Yeah. But thank you all. I appreciate it, like I said. And it was really nice to chat with you.
Yes, it was so nice to meet you. Thank you so much once again. And I will talk to you all later.
Bye, guys.
Bye.